Hi everyone, I'm Nigel Saunders, and it is another beautiful day here today. I'm going to be repotting my cedar, or my Thuya occidentalis. This tree was collected 4 years ago, and it's been 3 years since it was repotted. Repotting is an exciting time for me. It allows you to change the pot if you want. You can improve the root structure. You can change the orientation of the tree. So it's an exciting time. It can really transform the tree from something ordinary into something extraordinary. Today I'll be repotting my cedar from this classic rectangular bonsai pot to a shallow oval landscape type pot. The tree is almost a forest, so I think it'll look right at home in a landscape style pot. Let's get out the toolbox and start today's work here in the bonsai zone. When the sap starts flowing in spring, the cedars change from a rusty olive color to a bright green color, so you know it's a good time to repot them. I am going to change the front of the tree just a little bit. I'm just going to shift it over a bit so you can see all these trees equally spaced around the central tree. I'm going to start by removing the tree from the pot. So I'll have to grab the trunk and lift it out. That came out pretty easily. I'm going to examine the roots now. It looks like it's filled the soil really nicely. There's roots up top, roots on the bottom. It looks even, so it shows my soil and my watering was good on this tree. If you water too little, all your roots will grow in the bottom where the moisture is. If you water too much, the roots in the bottom will rot. You'll have roots only at the top. So this looks good. I am going to try and save the moss, so I'll try scraping it off the surface here. I've got the moss removed, so now it's time to rake out the roots. So I'm going to rake them from the center of the tree, raking outwards in a radial pattern. The roots on a cedar are very fine, but they're also very tough. They're like wire. So when I'm raking in a radial pattern. So the only roots that I'll rip through with the rake are crossing roots. All my radial roots will stay intact. The mature cedars have really nice radial roots at the base of the trunks. If you look at some of the cedars from out west, the western red cedars, and yeah, they beautiful root bases on them. So we're trying to get that look in our little miniature tree. I create a playlist for all my trees. So if you want to see what this tree looked like 4 years ago, go to the playlist tab on the channel and hit, I think it's called a Cedar Clump Progression playlist. And yeah, you can follow this tree along, everything I've done to it since I collected it. So that's my goal, is to record all the steps I've taken towards getting a collected tree to a bonsai tree. As I work on the roots, I keep them watered so they don't dry out. I have the surface roots raked out now, so I'm going to flip the tree over and start raking out the roots from the bottom. Again, I'll start from the middle and comb outwards in a radial pattern. A lot of these roots ran around the pot at the bottom, so definitely time to repot the tree. I mean, it could have gone longer health-wise, but to get the roots all sorted out, you have to repot often. I finished raking out the roots, so now I'll wash them in a tub of water to remove all the old soil. I'm using the rake to get the soil out of all those crevices. I've got the tree back on the bench, and now I'll comb out all the roots in a radial pattern, and we'll see what needs pruning. There's another drainage screen. I'm going to come in now and start pruning the long roots, shortening them. We want to grow all our roots out evenly. We don't want some getting more vigorous than others. That looks pretty even there. It is sitting a little high and it's rocking a bit, so I'm going to go underneath and see what roots I can prune away on the bottom. So I'm just looking, I'm going to remove all these roots growing straight down. And a few dead roots sticking down here that I'm removing. I think that's what was causing it to rock. Let's see how it sits now. Oh, that's much better. Okay, I'll give that a final wash, and then I think we're ready to plant the tree. I'll be planting the tree in this mica pot that I got from Hong last week. So I'll put a layer of soil on the bottom, and then we'll position the tree. This soil is half turfus and half perlite. I screen it to remove as much of the dust as I can. I've got the tree now, and I'll position it in the pot. And I'm not sure where it's going to go, but we'll try it in a few places. We'll start with the middle. I think the tree has to be shifted to the right-hand side. Try it there. That's not bad. Maybe just a little. It looks pretty good in this position, but the tree's quite high in the pot. I may be able to take some of the soil away down low here. That's about as low as I can get it. I'll have to sort of mound the soil up, make a bit of a hill, I think. I fine-tuned the position of the tree in the pot, so I'm happy with the position it's in right now. So I'm going to do a final check of the roots, combing them out as best I can, and then we'll fill it in with soil. There's an overhead view. So I'm just checking the roots, getting them all combed out. So this group of trees is just one tree. These are just branches growing off of it. So it's a true kind of clump style. Okay, I think that looks good. I'm going to start filling it in with soil now. These shallow pots do hold a lot of soil. Next, I'll be working the soil into the roots, getting rid of any air pockets down there, making sure all the roots are in contact with the soil. When the soil is dry like this, it flows really nicely between the roots. Unfortunately, it makes a lot of dust too, but I'm being very careful not to breathe it in. These roots will have lots of room to grow in this new pot. I want the soil level just below the lip of the pot, so when I add the moss, it'll come pretty well level. The tree feels nice and firm in the pot. Everything's looking good, so it's time to give the tree a water. So here I go. The repotting of my cedar clump is all done. I'm happy with it. I think it looks good in its new shallow oval pot. I'm going to leave the landscaping for another video, probably later on in the summer when the tree's recovered. Here's a final look at my cedar clump in its new pot. So let's go inside now for today's update. Hi everyone, we're back inside for today's update. As you can tell, my plant room's getting quite crowded. I don't really have room to put all these trees. But today's update is going to be my guava bonsais. In the last video of this guava bonsai, I severely root pruned it, removing all those twisted and tangled roots and keeping just a few radial surface roots. And the tree struggled for a bit, but then it started growing really well. And it's been growing really well ever since. Let's pan up. And you can see it's almost the height of the Canada arm. Today I'm also going to deal with my guava tree seedlings. They were just small seedlings when I planted them in the last video. And now they've grown into quite a tall tree. So we're going to be doing some bonsai work to them. When I grow a bonsai tree, I try and get the roots in order first, so getting a nice radial root pattern. Then when that's established, I'll let the tree grow to thicken up the trunk. So I start with the roots, then the trunk, and finally the branches. So this tree, I've done some root work and I've let the tree grow. So today I'm going to prune the tree back and I'm going to do some more root work. I often get asked, well, how tall do I grow the tree before I do any pruning to it? And my answer is, if you're trying to thicken up the trunk, grow it as tall as you practically can. So right now the height of this tree is getting into the impractical size. It's starting to get too tall. These ones are starting to flop over. So they need to be pruned down so it's a manageable size in this plant room. I'm going to repot the guava tree from the nursery pot into this bonsai pot. It's a bigger pot, it'll give the roots lots of room to grow, and the tree will look just a little better. So I'm just going to prune the tree back. Anything really long, I'm going to prune off. This one. And I'll prune these back, just reducing the height slightly. So this is a more practical height for the largest guava tree now. I'm also going to prune the seedlings back in height so they're not so floppy and they take up less space on the bench. With the seedlings, I'm just going to prune them back short. So just cutting them off short like this, and we'll see what grows in. There's a tall one that got pruned off. These should backbud really nicely and continue growing. I like the form of these seedlings. They're kind of growing with some movement to them, which should look quite nice as they mature. They'll have a subtle movement to them, which I think I'll really like in future. Okay, so that's pruned up. I'm not going to repot the little seedlings yet. I'll let them grow for another season in this pot. They're not root bound or anything yet. Let's go outside now and do the repotting of the guava tree and see what's happened to those roots in the last year. It's really windy outside today, so I'm going to repot here in the greenhouse. When I repotted this tree last, it only had like 3 or 4 surface radial roots, and I cut the rest of the root system off with a square cut. So it'll be really interesting to see how the roots have developed. Okay, let's begin. I'm going to get the tree out of the pot. I'm going to try pulling on it. Yeah, it's coming. There we go. Oh, look at all those roots. Wow, that's a lot of roots. That's good. Okay, let's start raking and see what we have here. Just gently combing them out, trying not to rip any roots. Looks like we have some good radial surface roots. This is a good sign. That's always the start of a good bonsai, is getting the root base developed first. I've got the soil removed from the roots now, and you can see how they've been curling around in the bottom of the pot. So a lot of that is going to have to be removed. Here was my root plane right up here. So a lot of these new roots down below my root plane are going to have to be cut off, and we'll just leave our radial surface roots up here. So here I go with the root pruning. It's going to be quite severe again. So I've got to cut off all the roots below my root plane, which is right here. So I'm just going to cut them off rough at first. There's a big root. That's going to have a lot of roots attached to it. Quite a, yeah, so that's a lot of root coming off of that one cut. But I'm not done yet. I'll be removing this one also. And this one. And this one. More roots. So you can see our radial surface roots up here. And I'm going to have to prune it off flush with those. So here I go. Big cut here. There we go. So you can see I'm left with my radial surface roots now. And that's what we'll plant again. I've got my drainage screen in the pot, so I'll fill it up partway with bonsai soil. I will be planting the tree fairly deep in the pot. So I'll position the tree. It'll just be in the center of the pot. And then I'll rake out the roots to get them nice and radial. I'm going to do a little trimming of the roots. Some of them are a little long. These roots are a little long, so I'll just trim them back so they're not curled up in the pot. There's one root growing a weird direction here. I'll prune that off also. The rest are looking pretty good. So let's get it filled in with soil now. I planted the tree quite deeply in the soil, so the roots are down somewhere about here. And that's so the tree stays upright, so it won't flop over. It's nice to know that there's a really good root system developing under the soil here. We're the only ones that know it's there, but it is there. And someday we'll expose those surface roots and they'll look fantastic. So let's get the tree watered now and get it back on the bench. I only have the big watering can outside here, so it might be a little excessive the amount of water that comes out, but it should water it well. So here I go. Again, a rather severe root pruning to the guava tree. If you do this kind of severe root pruning, I recommend you position the tree in a nice humid place like a greenhouse or a plant room. Or you can put a clear plastic bag around the tree to keep the humidity in while the tree recovers. If you were just to root prune a tree like this, put it out on the bench in the sun, the leaves would just shrivel up and die, and you may lose the entire tree. So the tree has to go into a nice humid environment in order for it to live. I'm Nigel Saunders, and that's all for today's adventure here in the Bonsai Zone.